Welcome to Prism Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 5 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss views in an MVC application. Please watch part 4 before proceeding with this video. Now let's say using our MVC web application, I want to display the list of countries as you can see on the slide here. Let's see how to achieve this. Let's flip to Visual Studio. So at the moment, if you look at this index action method within the home controller class, it's actually returning a string. Now if you look at the list of country names, they're nothing but list of strings. So let's change the return type of this function to list of string. Okay, and then to display the list of countries, I don't need these two parameters, so let me get rid of them. And then since the return type of this action method is list of string, let's actually return a new list of string. And then we actually want to return a list of countries back. So let's hard code some countries here. In reality, we may retrieve them by interacting with a WCF service or by retrieving them from a database table, etc. Okay, but for now, to understand views, let's actually hard code the names of countries within this, new list of string object. So let's say, for example, I want to return India as one of the country, and then US, UK, and Canada. Alright, so now let's go ahead and run this. And one more thing, we don't need this get details action method, so let's get rid of that, and let's go ahead and run this application and see what's going to happen. What do we expect? We expect the list of countries to be displayed like this on the form once it renders, but let's see what's going to happen. Look at this, instead of rendering the list of countries, it actually is printing the name of the type. Okay, so if you look at what is the return type of this function, it's list of string. But look at the IntelliSense list of string class. It's actually present in system.collections.generic namespace, and that's what is printed on this form right here. Okay, so to correct this error, to correct this, this is not an error, but it's actually incorrectly printing the type name instead of looping through each country and then printing those country names. Okay, so to fix this, we can actually add a view. So what are views in Model View Controller? The purpose of a view is to render the data, is to format the data in the way we want and present it to the end user. So we give view some data, and then in the view itself we specify how we want to format it. Do you want to bold it, underline it, or you want to present it using a table, using an unordered list or a bulleted list, etc. That's what is the job of the view, to format the data and then present it to the end user. So we are going to give this data, the list of strings, to a view, and that view is going to determine how to format that and how to present it to the end user. Okay, so we want to return a view from this controller action method. And to return a view, first we need to add a view to this project. And to do that, right click anywhere on this function and then select add view. And look at the add view dialog box. Look at the name of the view. It's index. Okay, the name of the view is matching the name of the controller action method here. And then we're going to make use of Razor View Engine. So let's select Razor as the view engine, and then leave the rest of the defaults. We'll discuss strongly typed views in a later video session in a very great detail. Okay, but actually before I click add, let me cancel out of this. And let's look at Solution Explorer. Look at this views folder. At the moment, it doesn't have any other files and folders except for web.config file. We'll discuss the purpose of this web.config file in a later video session. Now, let me go ahead and add a view. So add view. I'm going to leave the defaults there and click add. So this should add a view with name index.cshtml to our solution, to our project. Let's see where it has added. Look at this. Within the views folder, I've got another folder here, home, and within that home folder, index.cshtml is present. So why did this add this home folder? Because if you look at the name of the controller, it's home controller, and this home controller can have several action methods. Okay, so all the views that are related to this home controller will now reside within this home folder of this views folder. Okay, alright, so for our index action method within the home controller to be able to return a view, there are some changes that we need to do. First, we need to change the return type of this function. So since we want this controller action method to return a view, I'm going to change the return type of this function to action result. And then ultimately what we want to do from this function, I want to return a view, so I'm going to say return view. Okay, so which view is this function going to return? Since here, look at the name of the controller action method, it's index. And where is this index action method present? Within home controller. Okay, so MVC uses some conventions by default. So because of those conventions, what it's going to do, it's actually going to look within the views folder for views, and then the name of the controller is home. So it's going to find for home controller, and then within the home controller it checks, okay, is there a view with name index.cshtml. If it's present there, it's going to pull that out from there and then render that. Okay, alright, so that's what this return view is going to return. It's going to return this view. And then look at what we want to do with that view. We actually want to display the list of countries like this. Okay, so where do we store this list of countries? So obviously from this controller action method we need to pass these list of countries to this view. Okay, so how do I pass data from a controller to a view? Okay, there are several ways we can do it. We can either use something called view data, view bag, or we can use view models. In this video we'll see how to use view data. Okay, so instead of returning this list back, because I cannot do that now because the return type of this function is action result, which is going to return a view there. Okay, now you may be wondering, okay, this view, if I hover my mouse over here, look at what's the return type of view. It's actually view result, but the return type of this controller action method is action result. So how am I able to return a view result when the return type is action result? That's because if I right click on this view, go to definition, so it's view result, but then when I right click on view result, go to definition, it inherits from view result base. When I right click on that and go to definition, look at that, ultimately a view inherits from action result. Okay, so that's the reason why I'm able to return a view in spite of this return type being action result. Okay, now why is this there? Why are we using a super type? Why can't I just say, view result as the return type? We can do, but remember, a controller action method can do more than just returning a view. It can return to another controller action method, or it can return a JSON result. It can do several things. We'll talk more about that in a later video session. Okay, but for now, if you ask me, can't I make the return type of this function view result? Absolutely, you can do that as well. So if I make this view result, for example, it's still going to work. Why? Because I'm just returning a view, and a view is going to return a view result back. They match, so no problem. Alright, but then before we return a view, as from this controller action method, we need to store this list of countries somewhere so that the view can pull them out and then print them. So where am I going to store them? I'm going to use something called view bag object for this. So there's something called view bag. So I'm going to make use of that object, and then here, look at this, I can use some dynamic properties on this. I can give any meaningful name. For example, these are list of countries, so I'm going to use a property on this, a dynamic property, countries, and into that I'm going to store this new list of string. Okay, so this property is dynamic property. You can use countries, or you can give it any meaningful name that makes more sense. Okay, so what are we doing in this controller action method? We are storing this list of countries within this property of this view bag object, and then we are returning a view. And which view is this going to return? This is going to return this index.cshtml. So within this view, now what we need to do, we need to retrieve those countries out of that view bag object and then display them to the user using an unordered list. Okay, so let's change the code in index.cshtml. First of all, we want to have the title as countries list, so let's change that to countries list, and then let's have the same title for the page. Okay, now if I want to print an unordered list like this, we use nhtml unordered list. So I'm going to make use of unordered list, and then each country should be displayed as a bullet item. So within an unordered list, we will have a list item, right? So now what we need to do, we need to loop through. So we need to loop through each country. But where are these countries stored? They are stored in this country's dynamic property of this view bag object. So retrieve those countries. So what I'm going to do here is for each, look at that. Now I have some HTML here, but I also need to write some C# code. So how do I switch between C# and HTML? I use the symbol @ in Razor. Okay, so now when I type for each, look at that, I get IntelliSense as well. For each string str, let's call this variable country in, where are our list of countries present? It's present in view bag object. And what is the property that we have used to store those countries? It's countries property. So let's copy the property and what we want to do. So for each country we are looping through, and then basically we want to display this country inside a list item. So I'm going to put it there. That's it. Let's go ahead and run this and see what's the output that we get. So what do we expect? We expect the list of countries to be displayed using an unordered list like this, and let's see what's going to happen. So it's still rendering. Look at that, instead of printing the name of the country, it's actually printing the name of the variable, and that's understandable because Razor thinks that okay, this is HTML. We started HTML and it thinks this word is something that the end user want to print just like that. But no, it's actually a variable which is this one, which contains the name of a country. So to convey our intention that it's a variable, all you need to do is specify the @ symbol there. So now it's going to treat that as a variable, and whatever value that's present in that variable is going to be retrieved and then printed in between that opening and closing tag of list item, and we have the output as expected. Alright, so what did we do? We added this controller action method. We are storing the list of countries in that country's property of the view bag object, and then we are returning a view which is going to return this index.cshtml view, and within that view, what are we doing? We are looping through each country and then printing them. So we are using Razor views here. Alright, and that's what is the picture is doing here. Look at that, this is the action method that gets invoked, and this returns this view. This view pulls data out of this country's view bag object and then prints them, and this is the output. So view bag and view data, for the moment we're going to discuss more about these in our next video session. For now, understand both of them as a mechanism to pass data from a controller to a view. But remember, to pass data from a controller to a view, it's always a good practice to use strongly typed view models. We'll discuss more about view models in a later video session. Now we use @ symbol to switch between C# code and HTML. Alright. On this slide you can find resources for ASP.NET, C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.